What's up, YouTube? If you're anything like me, sometimes you make a lot of dungeon tiles. And sometimes when you're making all those dungeon tiles, you have to build some tools to help you make all those dungeon tiles. And that's what we're going to talk about this week on Short Rest Studios. Hi, so this week on Short Rest Studios, my daughter Zoe is joining me. Scott's out enjoying some time with his son right now. But Zoe and I are going to take a look at some video that I shot of building this little guy right here. And what this is basically a little, it's not little, it's kind of good size, but it's a paint drying rack for crafting. So essentially I do make a lot of dungeon tiles, and I needed a way to let the paint dry without it, especially the base coat, that Mod Podge and black paint base coat, without it getting stuck to whatever surface I was resting it on. And I used to use I put them on a cutting mat, and they would come off okay, but now there's a lot of black paint on my cutting mat, and sometimes they would stick and things like that. And so I started using a piece of cardboard with like stick pins stuck through it, and that was a pain in more ways than one, right? Because I stuck myself on the pins a few times. And so, I was talking with my wife about it. I could give her props as she kind of helped me come up with this idea of doing something with pegs. And also another little detail of this one that she helped come up with, and I'll show you that in the footage. But right now, Zoe and I are going to watch and talk about this little bit of footage that I shot of me building this project. And I just want to say right up front, like, this is really helpful. And not only is it helpful for small things like dungeon tiles and doors and things like that, but if you have a bigger project,
or bigger tiles.
Anything even bigger than what I'm doing on it currently, I think this would be great for. So let's take a look at that footage. I basically wound up building this out of about a 2x3 piece of plywood. It was just a 2x3 piece of pegboard. It was just something I had left over. So what I'm doing now is taking these dowels, and I decided 2-inch pegs would be a good height. So I'm just marking out 2-inch increments on that dowel. And now I'm just taking a hacksaw, and I'm gonna saw it off. And the reason I'm using a hacksaw is just because it was what I had available.
The camera is
yes,
shaky.
And the camera is shaking because I've got it attached to the same table that I'm sawing on. But you can see, I mean, I'm just cutting those into 2-inch segments. So nothing spectacular. That's pretty much all that is, and we'll just watch a little bit of that.
So all of these are.
And I did manage to do it without cutting my thumb off. So, and this is the hard part. Like you should probably maybe be a little safer than I was with that, but I was trying to be as careful as I could. So I cut a whole bunch of these. You can see I cut a ton of them. I think I cut like six different dowels down into pegs, and then I just sanded the ends off. And I started out using this sanding block, and I wound up tearing big holes in it, and it, just was taking a while. So I got
it's a lot of pegs.
Yeah. So I got smart here in a minute and used a little redneck ingenuity.
You calling yourself dumb right now?
I mean, this wasn't necessarily the best way to do it. If I was just doing a few of them, it would have been fine. So you can see I do a few of these, and then
you're like, this is crap. I should be doing something else.
And I'm like, I shouldn't be doing this. So in a few minutes, I decided, oh my gosh, this is horrible. So I got out my little palm sander. There we go. So that's the good part right there. So I started doing this, and this worked really well. I just turned on the orbital sander, and I just quickly. I sanded the rough spots off the ends of them, and then I kind of sanded around the edge of each end just to smooth it out, because it doesn't really matter that much. I just don't want to get snagged on my stuff when I'm making it, and I don't want it to have to punch holes in my dungeon tiles, which is what I was having to do before with those pins. But this way, I don't have little spiky bits.
The pins did the job; they just weren't the best at it.
Right, and they caused me pain, literally. So, but this. I'm just trying to make sure that I don't have any little spiky bits and things like that to snag on my material.
Do you know how many pegs?
You want to count them?
No, I don't.
No, I don't remember.
I was really hoping you had a count.
I don't remember, but we could do some quick math and say there's about enough for 30 pegs, or for 30 tiles, and each tile takes up 4 pegs, so that's 120.
I'm not that good at math.
Yeah. So now you can see I've got my my pegboard here. And what I did, so those are 1/4-inch dowel rods, okay, and I've got this pegboard has 1/4-inch holes. And so what I did is just put a little bit of wood glue on the end of each peg and hammer it into a hole. Basically, I started out one row of holes inside just so I could leave sort of a lip around. Now you'll see eventually when you see the finished product that I decided I was just going to go all the way to the edge. But so I basically hammered these in with some wood glue just to make sure they stayed in patterns of 4, with a space between each peg in that square of 4, and then 2 spaces in between each set of 4.
It'd be pretty weird if it was like 4 all together.
Yeah. Well, that wouldn't really do the job. There needed to be a little bit of space between them. So I get that first set of 4 in, and then you can see I move 2 spaces over, and I do the next set. And I basically just did this for about an hour.
How long is the video?
The video is like 15 minutes because I didn't do the whole thing.
I would really.
So you can see I was trying to leave a little bit of space originally. So like leave some space at the end of each row so I didn't go all the way to the end. But then I just decided I'm just going to use up all the space I got. And so eventually I get all those pegs in. And the next step is I take my trusty hot glue gun and I put a little dab of hot glue on the end of each peg. And the reason for this is that if you just put those tiles down on the bare wood on those pegs, they just kind of slide around. That XPS foam just kind of slides around on them. And you'll see that later, but I just did every single one of these pegs. I put a little dab of hot glue on, and it basically acts like a little rubber foot or a little silicone foot. So you can see the next bit of footage here once I've finished with the hot glue, and I'm pulling strings of hot glue off the pegboard.
Yeah, that's an issue with hot glue.
Yes, it is. So I put one of these tiles down, and you can see it doesn't slide around. Now, okay, the second one I put it on was one without glue on it. This one has glue on it. Now, if you put you're putting a little bit of downward pressure, you can't really slide it around. You can still move it around on top of those, but if you put it on the one that's just bare, that doesn't have any glue on it, it just slides all over the place with no.
Yeah, you can tell.
Yeah, but you can see that it's a little more secure on the ones with the hot glue. And that was the idea, is that we just wanted it to be like this. So this is where we're going to show you, this is what the finished product looks like with some cut tiles on it. And you can see it holds them up off the surface. And with that hot glue, you'll see here in just a second, Zoe was kind enough to help me out here to film a little bit of this and me picking it up and moving it. Now, if I didn't put that glue on there, those guys would just be flying all over the place.
Yeah.
Like the least little bit of air.
You should have done like a before and after without the glue.
Like
of them flying off.
Yeah, sure. But there we go. Like that works, and now we can see that I need to lose some weight. So there it is.
Yeah.
So there's the project. So what do you think, Zoe?
I mean, it's smart.
It's
and
boring. It's boring, though, right?
I mean, it's just some pegs with some hot glue glued into it.
But see, the point is that, you know, a lot people who do this kind of stuff, like we like to do stuff ourselves, and to be able to figure out something like this. And listen, this was really cheap. These dowels are 4-foot dowel rods. They cost about a little over $1 a piece.
So what it is just really cheap.
I spent $6 on dowels. I already had the pegboard, but you can buy a 4x2 panel, project panel of pegboard for pretty cheap at your local big box hardware store, and spend $6 on some dowel rods. And if you already got some kind of little saw, you can just saw those down and, you know, make your own paint drying rack.
Yeah, so cheap but useful.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what we're going for, right? That's why we buy our foam core at the dollar store. So you've wasted another perfectly good 15 minutes watching Short Rest Studios, and we thank you so much.
For wasting that 15 minutes of your
Yes,
time.
because we had a lot of fun talking to you about this. And I want you to come back next week because Zoe and I are going to do another episode together next week. Not because we don't love Scott. We love Scott and miss Scott. He's going to be back with us soon. But Zoe and I are actually going to talk about... We're going to try to ignore all the OGL nonsense that's going on right now in the world and talk about Zoe's first experience playing Dungeons and Dragons. It was my pleasure to have been her DM for her first time playing. And so we're going to talk about that and just talk about what it's like for family to do that together and what it was like for her playing for the first time. And that's going to be next week on
Short Rest Studios.
How's that?
Good.
Is that better?
Yeah. Yeah.
Did I say
good.
dungeon tiles enough? Should I say dungeon tiles some more? Dungeon
Yes.
tiles.
Yes.
Dungeon tiles, dungeon tiles, dungeon tiles.